Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr.
And I'm Christine Williams.
And you are listening to the Fiber Talk twice weekly podcast for people who play with needles, thread, ground cloth, scissors, and stitching charts.
Yes.
There we have
well
it.
Done.
Thank you very much. Our guest this week, Brittany Church. Hi, Brittany.
Hello there.
Ingleside Imaginarium, and doing research on you, you're an actor. So before we go any further, we got to learn about acting, and then we got to learn where this Ingleside Imaginarium name comes from.
Sure. They actually kind of go hand in hand a little bit. I moved to New York City 5 years ago to be an actress, a musical theater actress. So, not so much film or television, although I certainly wouldn't say no if the opportunity came. But, the reason I picked New York City to live is because, of course, Broadway is there. And that's where all the theater companies around the nation go to find their talent. And so I moved there to pursue musical theater and go to auditions. And I moved into an apartment with one of my good friends from college who was also pursuing musical theater. And she's actually a huge Anne of Green Gables fan. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Anne does in every place she lives, whether it already has a name or she decides to name it, is, these places she lives has a name. It makes it feel more like a home. So when we moved into our apartment in New York to make it feel a little more homey, we called it Ingleside. And that is one of the books, Anne of Ingleside, in the series. And so when it came to naming it started as my Etsy store because I used to I didn't have cross stitch in my store because I hadn't started designing patterns yet. And it started as a place to sell some other types of art and turned into the cross stitch store I have now, Ingleside Imaginarium. I liked the alliteration, and it was kind of a place to sell creatures at the beginning, these 3D creatures that I've made in the past. But, now kind of encompasses, I like to think, Imaginarium. That's, everything that comes out of my imagination, which in this case includes cross-stitch patterns. So they do kind of have a little tie-in together. One wouldn't have probably happened without the other.
Are you one of those people that always impresses me that can sing and dance and act all together?
Well, I actually am more what they call a mover than a dancer. So I'll let you. That is a real term in the business.
yeah.
So
help with that.
You have movers and you have dancers. So if you can, if you're very highly trained, it comes naturally. You can do triple pirouettes. You can do these big leaps and everything. You are a dancer. If you can learn choreography and not look really, really stupid doing it, then you're a mover. And that's what I am. I like to say I'm probably a singer first, and then an actor, and then a mover. which all of the shows that you see, you go and see shows like Cats, and of course that has a lot of dancing, but then you go and see Sondheim shows like Into the Woods or Sweeney Todd, and those ones don't have quite as much dancing. So for me, it really unfortunately limits the type of shows that I can be considered for, but it's just that one's not a talent that comes as naturally to me as the other stuff.
I'm still impressed.
Thank you. I'll take it.
Yeah, sing, dancing, and moving. To me, that's singing, acting, and moving. I'm calling that singing, acting, and dancing. That's
okay.
It always amazes me when I see plays, musicals, or whatever. People like you who can do all of that. I mean, I can move because I can walk from point A to point B, but that's pretty much it.
I don't think that's what they mean, though.
No, I don't count.
No.
Ugh.
Yeah. I would say you could make it on the stage. That's what a lot of it is. A lot of choreography on stages. We call that the blocking of the show, is literally moving from, let's say, center stage over to stage right or stage left, or down stage right, down stage left, and then sometimes you just have to do it in very special ways, which is trickier.
Well, this is fun. So, okay, so I want to learn more. And Christine, you've done some sewing of costumes, so you at least have
I
a
have.
flavor of that. So what you moved to New York? Did you have you done musicals or what?
I have. Well, I mean, I'm actually doing a musical right
You know,
now. I'm
give us
away
your
from my
rundown. Give us your rundown here, Brittany. Let's hear it.
So I moved to New York. Well, first of all, I went to school. I went to college for musical theater. I did my first, well, I did church pageants and Christmas plays in church when I was very little. But in middle school, I did my very first musical. And then I also was able to see my sister in a production of Into the Woods at the local high school. And I saw that and was smitten. And as soon as I did my first musical in high school, I changed from wanting to be a paleontologist and dig up dinosaur bones to deciding, no, I'm going to be on stage and sing and act and dance.
Okay. Paleontologist to actor singer. Okay. I see
Exactly.
that path.
That makes sense.
And so I ended up having to audition for a bunch of colleges, and I ended up getting into a few, but I picked out Belmont University in Nashville as my school to study musical theater. And then I was there for 4 years. After 4 years, I ended up, this is kind of another silly part of my life. I won't say silly, it's not silly, but just kind of not many people have this experience, but I actually did plays in 2 different spots in the country. I worked in Shipshewana, Indiana, and then in Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County. And I did these shows based on Amish inspirational novels. So they were musicals based on novels that are, have Amish characters and themes. So I did that for about 2 years, and then after those about 2 or 3 years, I moved to New York City. And since then, that was about 5 years ago, I've been in and out of the city doing regional shows in different places around the country. So not as much as some people, but I certainly have had a lot of opportunities. So that's been great.
That's fun. So you're in the Quad Cities now. What are you doing there?
Yes, I'm in a production of Freaky Friday. If you remember, there were two previous movie versions of that, and then this is the live musical version. And it just premiered in 2016, and our theater, Circa 21, is in Rock Island, Illinois. We're one of the first ones. I think we're definitely the first in the state of Illinois, but we might even be first in kind of the Midwest area to get to do it. So it's kind of a brand new show, which is always really exciting, and it's got a lot of really great music, and we have a very talented cast here working on it. So it's been really lovely, and we have, I think, 5 shows a week, which leaves lots of time for stitching and crafts, which for me has been really wonderful.
Yeah.
New York,
Yeah. When's the
keeps you busy.
When's the next show? I can be there in about 3 hours.
Well, our next show that we're selling tickets for is Friday night. So.
All right, I'll speak to the boss. We'll see. that would be wild.
that would be pretty crazy. We're running until March 24th, so I'll be here, about another month or so. So yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah, sounds like it. So the downtime and the stitching fills the downtime then.
Oh yeah. I have a 9 to 5:30 job in New York, and then you add that on top of trying to get to auditions, and you add that on top of like my design work for cross stitch and because I get sometimes private commissions for costume work and things like that too. So it's just like all of the stuff that I have going on in New York combines to where either at the end of the day I come home, I'm too tired to continue sewing because my day job is actually working in a costume shop, and then either I'm too tired or I don't have the time to really sit and like make some good progress. So I've actually been really enjoying getting back into my stitching for about the past month I've been here. So yeah, that's been nice.
Where'd you learn to stitch? How'd that come about?
Well, I have a vivid memory of being at the YMCA pool on the other side of one of my mom's friend's cross-stitch projects, poking the needle back up through the hole for her. She would poke her needle down, and then she would say right or left, or somehow communicate to me which way the needle needed to go back up into it. And so I remember thinking cross-stitch was really neat since I was little, but it wasn't until middle school that I started my first project, and it was this it wasn't a tiny project. It was this pretty big, like, dragon and castle pattern. It was a Jan Lin kit called Water Dragon. And, of course, I picked it because I've always had a fascination for dragons. And I ended up I think I finished about a quarter of it and then put it in a shoebox and didn't touch it for years. And then, like, probably over the next... it might be even 10 years, because I was in middle school, probably around 12 when I started it, and I didn't finish it until I'd graduated college. So after post 22, it was like one of those projects where you don't touch it for years, but then you think about it and you're like, hey, I do kind of want to work on that for a little bit. And then I'd put in a few stitches and then, of course, go back to school or do whatever and forget about it. And I was doing a show. It was one of the Amish shows, actually, and a cast member was working on a cross-stitch project. And I was like, oh, that does look nice. I remember I have this dragon, so I had my mom ship it to me. And from working on that and picking it back up then, that was it. I just fell in love again. And so it started with that. I would say kind of the resurgence was like picking up that project and finishing it was probably around 2013, 2014. And then the discovery of floss tube and finding out that was a thing, and the discovery of, this hobby isn't just kits that you can buy in the store. You can go online and find patterns of pretty much anything you could ever think of to search for. And kind of that discovery just really sucked me in. That's all I can say is that there's something about this hobby, and then of course now the community that I've found within the hobby that just makes it my ideal way to pass time. I just love it.
Yeah, that floss tube is an amazing community of people. There's no doubt. That's really has grown and continues. It's amazing to me. Yeah, So that's downtime when you're when doing a play or rehearsing or whatever. Out comes the stitching.
Oh yes. And I am a firm believer in the ABC rule. Always bring cross stitch. I will be cross stitching on the subway. I will be cross stitching in a rehearsal room. I will be cross stitching. I try to cross stitch in the car if I'm not driving, but I get a little nauseous. So that is a place where I found I cannot. But anywhere else, if I have an appointment I'm waiting for, going back to the acting thing, one of the things that people don't realize about that process is how draining it is, because here's the way it works is that you get up literally at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes it's winter, so it's very cold. You leave your apartment, get on the subway, go downtown close to Times Square is where a lot of the audition kind of rehearsal space audition spaces are, and you end up waiting in line, sometimes outside until the building opens, and then you end up waiting in line, and that's like, you get there at 5:30. Sometimes that's not till 8 o'clock. You can go inside, and then once you're inside, you have to wait around another hour and a half for the company to get there, and then you can finally sign up. And then depending on when you get there, that's why you get there so early, because you want to be at the front of the line. Sometimes you get seen right away, and those are the best days because you can go home and take a nap. But other times you wait all day long and you don't get seen. You don't even get to audition. So it's a really, really tough way that this process has developed, and a kind of a weird life, but it's part of, it's a necessity for the performing part of it, is the audition part of it. But going back to cross stitch and the ABC rule, I always bring cross stitch, because when you're sitting around hours and hours and hours, you make some pretty good progress.
Yeah, I'll say. Especially all day with nothing, just waiting. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people have different hobbies that they pursue while they're waiting. A lot of people will read, a lot of people listen to music, but one of the reasons why I think I like cross stitch so much as a way to spend your free time and as a hobby is you have something to show for it. And that, I just think that's really awesome. And for me, as someone who hates sitting around doing nothing and feeling like I've wasted time, if I go to an audition and I don't get seen, it feels like wasted time. But if I have, at least I finished up 3 colors on my current project, or, whatever I'm working on or whatever goal I've set. So that works for me.
So your standard go bag is chart, thread, and hoop, and needles, and off you go.
I've got a backpack that's like my New York bag, and in it generally is an umbrella, like a bottle of water, my cross stitch, and a sketch pad for if I don't have time to pull out my cross stitch and get set up. Then I have something else to do, and a book. I like to bring a book too. So that's I hate leaving home without having something to do, and I always feel naked when I don't have my backpack on. I'm like, I'm forgetting something.
It's a New York thing for sure.
Oh yeah,
because you never know where you're gonna get stuck somewhere, or
it's the truth. It's the truth.
So this deal in the Quad Cities then is a real nice break from that routine, I gotta imagine.
Oh, it's been so lovely. Like, I wake up and I can eat something and then sit in my room and stitch for a long while, and then go and do a show for, I have a lot of hair and I have to curl it for the show I'm in. So I have to be there a little earlier than other people. But, our show is only about 2 hours long. So I'm not at the theater for more than, I would say, 4.5, 5 hours a day. So the rest of the time is free for other things like stitching.
Nothing wrong with that. So when you're doing that stitching, are you stitching and developing your own designs or stitching other people's work?
Both.
Both. I could have guessed
yes.
that. Yes.
Some of that quote unquote stitching time is designing patterns. Some of it is stitching then my own patterns. Like, for example, I'm still small enough and new enough in the business, and I got to get this figured out soon. There's a lot that I'm looking at to grow this cross stitch design business, but right now I do my own model stitching. So typically I will release the patterns with a computer generated picture of what it could look like. But I mean, every stitcher I think will tell you that things look better actually stitched / not there are so many bad pictures of cross stitch on patterns even though. So, even just pictures, it's hard to really see what it's going to look like when it's stitched. So I am trying to get, I think I have a teeny tiny start on just about everything I've designed so far, but I've only have actual full size model stitches of a few of them. I just finished stitching my spring dragon. I have a series of 4 seasonal dragons, which the first 3 seasons, spring, summer, and autumn, have been released. And I'm working on designing winter as we, not as we speak, but earlier today I was working on it. And I just finished stitching the spring one, and it was a really exciting thing because, it was one that I came up with. So that, and then I've been, of course, working on the model stitch for the Guardians of Notre Dame mystery stitch along that I've been releasing this year. Yeah. And kind of that stitch along, of course, is my major goal per month. I try and stay at least 2 months ahead of schedule. The whole thing is designed, but stitching 2 months ahead so that if for whatever reason I get really busy and can't make a month, then I have some buffer room.
Right.
But
this dragon fascination carries on today. It's interesting that you still enjoy doing that.
Oh yeah, I think dragons for me, and I was thinking about this before we were going to chat tonight. I believe my fascination with dragons probably came about because, as I told you, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and dinosaurs and dragons have a lot of similarities. And so I think it kind of goes back to this fascination with kind of huge reptilian creatures. And then my dad read The Hobbit with me when I was little, and I think Smaug was one of the very first dragons that I kind of heard about and saw the illustrations for, and I was just like, oh, this is a cool creature. And one of the reasons I think dragons inspire me so much creatively is because they are a mythical creature. So a dragon can look any way you want it to look. There are no rules with dragons. There are rules with specific types of dragons, but dragons can have fur, dragons can have scales, dragons can have feathers. Dragons can look however you want them to. You can call it a dragon, and that's what it is. So that's part of the reason why I think creatively I feel really safe and comfortable with dragons, and luckily have found a target audience that a good portion of them like dragons as well, and fantasy things. I remember someone was asking me if I was going to do another Stitch Along this year after my Birthstone Dragons last year, and I had wanted to, but I couldn't think of an idea, and they were like, do mermaids, and I was like, oh, but if I do mermaids, they have to actually look like people. And I think many artists will tell you, whatever medium they work in, like, people are hard, especially once you get into the hand area and getting the anatomy right and the proportions right. So I feel pretty safe with my dragons, and I'm very lucky that I can succeed with those.
Well, I have to say that when I first encountered you and saw that you did a lot of dragons, I thought, boy, this is a classic example of how there is something for everyone in stitching. I mean, every interest area, there's something. And then once I encountered you, then it's like if you buy a car, then you start seeing all the other people that have the same car that you have. And I started seeing all the different dragon designs that there are out there for stitching. And it's really it's really much more extensive than I thought. It's just an interesting area. I mean, there literally is something for everyone in this hobby.
That's what I think is so cool, and I think what really, like I said before, just sucked me into cross stitching is I can be thinking, and I've done this before with a pattern. Oh, I just, for whatever reason, I'm feeling really inspired to stitch a leopard, and then I'll go either on FlossTube or I'll go on Etsy and I'll search, or 123 Stitch, or whichever vendor or the Facebook groups, and you just search for leopard, and I found one of my favorite projects that way, actually, and it's just it's really neat that you can go on and find pretty much whatever you want. And I'm blessed in that if I don't find what I want, then I can make it for myself, which is part of where, my dragons came from, because I think my dragons, and kind of where I'm hoping to go in the future with some of these dragons, is to find a style that isn't full coverage and isn't so cartoony. My Birthstone Dragons are very small, so they're cartoony, but with my seasonal dragons, and I have plans for some elemental dragons that I'm calling, the Mirabilia of dragons is what I hope they'll be. I'm going to get all kinds of beads and specialty floss and fibers and stuff in them. I didn't see those by other designers. You have a lot of dragons that are full coverage, which are gorgeous, but I'm not a full coverage stitcher. I've tried, and I feel, I told you earlier, I don't like feeling like I'm wasting time. And for me, just me personally as a stitcher, the amount of progress that I make, at least on a full coverage design, is just, it's not worth the time I put into it. So that's something I've learned, and that is, of course, nothing against people who do, find these full coverage designs very fulfilling, and I admire each and every one of them because I know it's not a type of stitching that I can do. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to go with my dragons, and kind of part of the inspiration behind them was just to stitch something that I didn't see out there yet.
Yeah, those people who do full coverage things, no thank you, but every time I see one, especially the ones with all the threads carried on to the next one, I am just, to the where the color starts again. I'm just in awe of those people and the fact that they can keep those going and that they'll finish one and they're ready to do another one. It's
I agree completely.
Yeah. That's the type of stitching it just amazes me. I'd like to watch somebody who's really good at it do one of those, like a heaven and earth design, and see just how fast they go, because you have to, I got to believe you have to develop a good deal of speed in order to feel, like you said, to feel like you made some progress after 2 hours.
Yes.
Yeah, that's and those those things are impressive. The detail that people get out of them is just amazing, and just tiny little X's and forever and ever.
I know. Whenever someone finishes one, especially, I feel so proud of them, because I know, having tried, the amount of work that goes into it, and the detail is really pretty cool, that it's just all little X's on fabric, and I just hope that other people see it and can appreciate it too, besides just us stitchers.
Yeah. Well, and the ones, and I can't,
so much work.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the technique where they just keep a thread going and bring it up.
Is it the parking?
Yes, parking. Yes, thank you. And how do you keep track? I know it. Because some of those people,
and
especially, they'll have 30 threads going at once. It's frightening.
Yeah, those are so confusing.
So many times, when you're in a big confetti heavy area where you have all of those colors, at least I have attempted one full coverage design and I finished one page, and it's kind of, I don't know that it's a give up forever, but it is classified as a UFO, unfinished object, right now. And for me, in that area, there were so many shades that were so close. I would park it in the right place, but then get down and think, I don't know which color this is supposed to have been. Yeah. So, I definitely admire everyone who can manage and organize their parked threads, and who have the speed and the passion and perseverance to do those full coverage ones. Yeah. It's very impressive.
Yeah. And then I finished a page. Oh, man. That would be a whole project for me.
Well, and it pretty much is. I mean, I think most pages are what, at least 800 by 1,000. I mean, I don't even know, but it's a lot of stitches.
Yeah, it's impressive stuff. So I got to learn about this. Been kind of keeping loose track of this Guardians of Notre Dame. What's the whole deal with that thing? You got a framework, and then each month, what are you doing?
Yes, so it's what I think in the business and the community has come to be known as a yearly mystery stitch along, and that means that for a lot of them, you pay one price up front, and it's kind of like a subscription service. You get one part of the pattern each month. So the first of the month, I release a new part of this pattern, and then you'll have a whole project at the end of the year if you keep up with it, which you don't have to keep up with it, but some people do try and stitch that little part each month, and then by the end of the year you have a finished project, which is always exciting. This one in particular, it's called, as you said, the Guardians of Notre Dame, and it was actually inspired by my trip to Paris that I took last year. It was the first time I'd ever been, and I went to the Notre Dame Cathedral and ended up getting to go up into the towers where all of these sculptures of these creatures are. And as I talked about with dragons, fantasy creatures and animal, I've always been fascinated with animals and different kinds of animals, and then different kinds of creatures in mythology and fantasy. And these are technically not gargoyles, which is something I learned in Notre Dame, and I'm trying to also kind of relay that information to the people who have joined the Stitch Along. These, in particular, at Notre Dame and in this, on the actual building itself and in this Stitch Along, I'm calling them chimeras, which in science, a chimera is a creature that has two different types of DNAs merged together. And so then kind of taking that idea, that came from the mythological chimera, which was any kind of creature that involves body parts for more than one animal, which then can go back even further into a specific chimera from Greek mythology, but I won't go into that. I will just say that these, because they are decorative statues only, they are not, they don't have a purpose other than decoration. They are called chimeras. Notre Dame does have actual gargoyles, and the gargoyles are classified as the sculptures that have the drain pipes going through them, and they are functional. Their function is to drain the water, of course. So it's being called the gargoyle Sal, which I have no objections to, but I'm always like, oh, they're chimeras, because I was always as I always like to have my information correct. So, and anyway, up until that point, I like I mentioned, people were saying, oh, are you going to do one next year? Are you going to do a stitch along again next year? I'm having so much fun with these dragons. And up until that trip to Paris, I was completely uninspired. But when I saw all of those statues up there, and I got to be within feet of them, they have a net up there so you can't touch them. But I just saw them and I fell in love. I don't know. It was just, it's weird to say that there was like almost a kinship, but definitely my soul reached out to them, and just the artist who came up with them and created them, and they're all different. I didn't even see half of them up close and in person, because there's a whole other side of the building that you can't reach on this little part of the tour. And to come up with different one, like I'm this year, and for my dragons came up with 12 different dragons this year. I'm interpreting 12 of the actual statues from the cathedral into this cross-stitch design, and they made up like 40 of them or something, and I'm only doing 12. But the stitch along itself, and part of the reason why I was so inspired with this idea is I came up with the idea to use a rose window motif, which is found a lot in cathedral architecture. And so it's a little different than your typical stitch along, because most of them are rectangular or square, laid out, kind of a 3x4 kind of rectangle. And I thought, oh, it might be really neat to do a round stitch along. And so I divided that window up into 12 sections, and each month a new chimera or gargoyle is coming out. And so far it's the reaction I've gotten and response has just been almost overwhelming. It's I think I'm very close to the numbers I had at the end of the year for the dragons last year, and it's only February. So it's been, I'm very excited and flattered that people are enjoying it so much.
That's great. And of course, people can start these anytime, so they can start today and catch up. Yes. Oh, yes.
And
or do a stitch along like me, start it and then never catch up. Yeah.
Yes, or that way too.
Yeah. That's my specialty.
You're talking to a girl with, I think, 31 works in progress.
There we go.
You're in good company.
There we go. All right. I knew I liked you, Brittany. Yes. Yes. So you're going with this kind of a stained glass effect then.
Oh yes, yeah. Yes, that's correct. I forgot to mention that, but yes, kind of with the idea of it being a rose window, I am going with a stained glass effect, which I've got your typical cross stitching for the figures of these sculptures, but then I've broken them up with backstitching, everyone's favorite, to kind of represent that leading in the stained glass windows. And I think it's looking really cool. And I have a Facebook group where people can post pictures of their progress, and that is really an amazing thing too, because it's people all over the world who are stitching this and posting their progress, and to think that something that originated in my head is now all over the world is really pretty darn cool.
Yeah,
that is cool.
Yeah. So are you a stitch it then chart it, or sketch it and chart it then stitch it person?
I am the latter. A lot of the times my designs start out as it depends. Sometimes I'm on the subway and I come up with the idea for a pattern and I'll sketch it really quickly in a notebook or my sketchbook. But sometimes with some of my patterns, I have an idea and I sit down directly in my program. I use a cross-stitch program to chart my designs and design it that way, kind of more like a pixel art feel. All of them are hand charted in these in this program by myself. I don't import pictures and start the designs that way. I do have a computer that doubles as a tablet with it, and I have a stylus. So sometimes I do like kind of sketch directly into the program, but yes, sometimes it starts with the paper sketch and then evolves into going and actually charting the design. And then usually after that is when I'll stitch it. But while I'm charting, I have my full set. Well, it's almost full. I don't have the new colors yet, but I have my set of DMC next to me just to keep an eye on the colors, because I know a lot of the times with these charts that don't necessarily get stitched right away or at first, once you do stitch them, you end up thinking the colors don't look quite right because they aren't the same as what's in the programs. So I try and keep that in mind so that I know it will eventually look okay. That's very important, I think.
How do those programs how do they handle the symbols? Because some of those charts, it's like, where do people come up with all these symbols? Are they built in and assigned to DMC colors, or do you have to select them?
Well, so as you add colors to your pattern, you have a bank of the DMC colors. The program I work with is PC Stitch, and it has a few different, it has Anchor, I think, as well, and a few of the bigger floss brands already loaded, and you can select which brand you want to use and select your colors from. For me, it's DMC because that's what I use to stitch and what is commonly available, typically where I'm at. And you can add your color to your current design, and it automatically gets assigned a symbol from a bank of symbols that this program has. And each time you add a color, it gets assigned a new symbol. So you don't have two colors, for example, with the same symbol, which is nice. Some of the times, though, something you do need to look out for, and because I am a stitcher and I was a stitcher first, this is something I try to look out for when I'm picking symbols for my colors in my pattern is to avoid putting two symbols that are very similar next to each other in a chart or in a section of a chart, because I know when I run into that stitching, you get, and I've heard of other people getting just a little frustrated if you have, for example, an O next to a 0 or the different leaning slashes next to each other is always tricky. So although it does get assigned automatically, sometimes I go in and tweak the symbols just to make sure that I don't have anything that is going to be confusing for stitchers.
Yeah, I was reading a thread the other day. Several women were rather upset over a couple of charts that the symbols were too close and too similar, and they were forever, how do you keep these separated? And they kept making mistakes, and I could really feel for them.
I know.
Yeah.
I've been there too.
You almost want to go through the chart and to color it before you start, right? So you have a fighting chance.
Yes, definitely.
Yep. And so then you have all of this goes through your Etsy store?
Yes, that is correct. Right now I'm distributing through my Etsy store. At the moment, I have just the PDF instant download, which then people are free to print wherever they want to and can, or to keep on their devices and use off of their device. Right now, I'm just digital only, but I'm looking into investing in a printer, a laser jet, so that I can hopefully later this year, start printing patterns that I can ship to people. But right now it's just digital, and it's through my Etsy store, which is Ingleside Imaginarium.
Creatively named. There you go.
Yes.
Are those Etsy stores pretty simple to set up?
They are. They're very easy to set up. They have, I think when you first sign up, they even might have like a tutorial that enables you to go through and helps you name your store and make your first listing and all of that. And you can set up your bank account with it to where you get your what money you do make, it deposits it into your bank account automatically, and you're not having to worry about transferring things. It also takes care of things like taxes for international purchasers or countries that require that, which is nice, because that was one of the most daunting things going in is, how do I know where and when I need to charge extra for tax and that kind of thing. Of course, if you are looking into opening, I mean, this is just your own business in general. You have to kind of keep all the end game financial stuff when tax season comes around. But it's very easy. Etsy does take a percentage of, it charges you to list an item. I think the charge is 20 cents for an item, and then it does take a percentage, and I can't quote that off the top of my head, but every time you sell an item, it does take a percentage, and that's just the fee for using their format and using their marketplace, which where I'm at in my business works out great for me.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the neat things about it is for people like you, it's a way to have a storefront, if you will, and market your materials and have a way to make transactions without going through all that on your own. So it's, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And a little fee off the top is worth it just to have that. Yes.
Oh, totally. I definitely think so. There may come a time in the future where I do move away from Etsy and kind of have my own website with its own store. But I think just about any where you go, they're going to have some kind of fee that they charge, either the software that you upload into your website or the coding that you use for a website. I feel like kind of everywhere you go you're going to run into that, but Etsy's really nice. It's been easy because I do have so many other things going on in my life. It's been really nice and easy to kind of have it as a side hustle and get those
portable.
Yes, exactly. And that's really easy too, is and especially because I goods, I'm here in Illinois versus, if I had a shop and had to leave for months, that could not be great. And I was running it on my own, that wouldn't be good for business. But since it is all digital, it doesn't matter where I'm at. I can always access it, which is nice.
So when you're not designing dragons and chimeras, what else interests you?
In cross-stitch design?
Yes. Nothing. She says nothing.
It is a lot of creatures. So my very first cross-stitch design was, this was one where I didn't see an option for this, and so I decided to create my own. It was a sriracha pattern for a friend of mine, and it said, "Hey, hot stuff," and had the sriracha bottle in it, and that led to kind of what was the beginning of a series, and which has kind of trickled off as I've gotten distracted by my dragons. But so I have a couple of like kind of really cute, more simple food-based. I have a honey bear pattern as well, and then a sugar bowl pattern, and then kind of the other big quote-unquote series that I have is called Home is Where the Dog Is, and I have a whole bunch of different breeds of dogs.
Yeah, I like those. I think those are great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's been fun about those is I've had. I would like to do more of them. It's just finding the time. But I've had people message me on Etsy and say, "Hey, I love your dog pattern, but you don't have a husky. Is there any way you can get a husky?" Which is why I now have a husky, is because I got, someone saying, "I would love to stitch this, but I have a husky. Can you make one?" And so what I do in that instance is I have them send me a picture of their pet, and I make a custom version that looks just like their pet, send that to them, and then make a more generic version of the breed and upload that into my Etsy store. And I've gotten a lot of requests for home is where the cat is, and I'm actually a cat owner. I have two, so you would think that I would have that, but it's on my list of patterns to make. I have it's a written list in a notebook of pattern ideas, and that one's on the list, and so I'll hopefully get to it.
Yeah.
And then there's so many breeds of dogs that that could continue going too, but yeah, it's I think it's really animals for me. There's so many people out there who do cool text things, quotes and things so much. I think that's the big thing for me, and kind of where my interests are is looking out into the market and what's already there and trying to find something that is unique and isn't there yet, and have that as an option for stitchers who are searching.
When you, because now that you're on the road, do you, when you leave New York to go on the road, do you have a whole suitcase full of stitching, or do you take just enough and then acquire as you go?
No, it's terrible. I messaged one of my stitchy friends and I said, I'm packing for this trip and I can't decide which whips to bring. And she was like, well, pick a favorite number. And my favorite number for a while has just, for whatever reason, been the number 6. And she was like, well, then bring 6. And I said, no, I can't do that. I have to bring them all. It's terrible, but it's like, well, what if I want to stitch that one and I don't have it here? Or what if I need this supply and I don't have it here? So, and with my pattern design business, it's like I kind of want to have all my options available to me and not buy more if I already have it. So I actually was able to bring, the Quad Cities is where all my relatives live. And so I needed to bring a car to bring my cats with me. They're staying with my grandma. She's been kind enough to be the cat sitter for me, and then I can go visit them because she's only about 30 minutes away from here. So I packed up my cats and I packed up my tub of cross stitch and drove to Illinois.
Are you in your world, in your acting world, do you see a lot of young people picking up stitching?
Nope, guess not. I don't. I every once in a while, if I'm at an audition, I have seen needlework in general. There are a lot of knitters. There are some crocheters. I've seen someone doing needlepoint / embroidery. But I think I'm the only one I've seen that's been doing cross stitch. But every time I'm there, people see it and they it piques their interest and they'll, what is that? What are you doing? And I'll explain, and then they all are like, that's a great way to pass the time here. And I'm like, I know, that's why I'm doing it. Yep. Yep. And then whenever I'm in a cast, I have taught a few friends who see me do it. I have spread it a little bit, but you don't see it too often.
That's too bad. Always looking for those pockets of young people who want to learn how to stitch to keep the hobby going. Yeah.
I know.
Right.
I think that's important too.
Yep.
Which, luckily it feels like the internet and Instagram, that helps, I think, kind of spread it around, and some people aren't fans of it, but the subversive cross stitch, I think, has been something that really has drawn a lot of younger people in, whether for good or for bad.
Yeah, that's quite a little world there. I've checked that out a couple of times. That's quite a little world of designs and the minds that create those things. Yes.
They're fun.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, and I look at a lot of patterns this way. I think it's not my taste, but I really like what you've done there. Yep. And if it encourages people to get creative and make art, I think, I don't see the harm in it. Yep.
Oh, that's, was it Judi Dench stitches that stuff all the time.
That's what I heard.
Yes. She's quite famous for, what are you stitching? You look over her shoulder and, what? How can this be? Yeah.
And it was funny because I heard that and I thought to myself, she is of course an actress, and I was like, oh, I'm not the only one.
Yep. Yeah, no, she's known for that. Yep. You can just see her. She'll just look at you like, yeah, what of it?
I love it. I love it.
So, Brittany, this has been a treat. Thanks so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure for me to get together and be able to talk shop and use all the lingo with other stitchers. So it's been definitely a pleasure.
Well, it's been a fun ride going and learning about your world. It's interesting. Thanks for doing it.
Yes. Oh, you are very welcome.
All right, that's going to be it. Thanks for listening, and Christine and I will be back on Wednesday.